One of Hitler's most daring dreams during World War II was to burn New York City to the ground. This desire would force through the development of the America Bomber project, an initiative undertaken through the Reichsluftwaffenministerium. If completed, the bomber would be able to reach the United States and return to Germany while making an 11,600-kilometer round trip, potentially carrying nuclear weapons. Several aircraft corporations drew up ambitious plans. Some were pursued further than others, even making it to the prototype stage. In the end, it would be a race to complete the America Bomber, as the Allies were closing in. The concept of bombing America was introduced in 1938. However, official plans for a long-range bomber didn't officially commence until early 1942. Multiple proposals were set forth, including plans to carry nuclear weapons on board. The program would go on to be scrapped due to high expenses and limitations with materials and production capacity. Hitler was personally fascinated by the thought of setting New York City ablaze. He believed the United States would be forced out of the war thanks to a series of well-planned attacks. Hitler almost had an obsession with enemy cities, often entertaining himself with films of explosions in enemy territories or fires in places such as Warsaw and London. In 1937, Hitler visited the Messerschmitt facilities in Augsburg, where he was presented with a 4-engine long-range bomber prototype. It was touted as being capable of reaching the United States East Coast from Western Europe. While the Führer was thrilled, Willy Messerschmitt failed to mention one thing. The Messerschmitt Me 264 prototype was currently incapable of flight. The design rehashed the 1930s P-1061 long-range reconnaissance plane, an all-metal aircraft with high wings and 4 engines. The heavy bomber had a round fuselage in cross-section, its cabin integrated into the nose. This made the plane stepless. The design became standard for German bombers. The Messerschmitt Me 264 was intended to have guns mounted to the fuselage's sides as part of remotely operated turrets. Still, the armament was limited to both retain fuel capacity and range. The prototype used 4 Junkers UMO 211 V12 engines. Due to their relatively low power, they were later replaced with similar BMW 901G engines. Meant for long-range missions, the inside of the bomber was equipped with bunk beds and a small kitchen with hot plates. Tests showed minor problems and that handling would be delicate. A significant issue was the Me-264's heavy load on the wing, which caused drag, loss in maneuverability, reductions of stability, and high speeds at takeoff and landing. The first prototype was without weapons or armor. The following 2 featured all the necessary armor for the gun positions, crew, and engines. Still, the second prototype lacked defensive armament and crucial equipment. By 1943, the Kriegsmarine, previously interested in the plane, declared the Junkers Ju-290 and 390 developments favorable. The Luftwaffe preferred Henkel's He-277 and Focke-Wulf's Ta-400. The German government ceased all payments for further development to Messerschmitt, effectively killing the Me-264. Towards the end of 1943, the second prototype was blown up during a bombing raid. On July 18, 1944, the first prototype was also damaged during a bombing raid in service at Transportstaffel 5. It was never repaired. The unfinished third prototype was also destroyed. Messerschmitt focused on the Me-262 jet instead, while the Germans moved their primary focus to the Junkers Ju-390. Junkers developed its Ju-390 as a long-range version of the Ju-290. It was intended as a maritime patrol plane capable of transporting heavy loads or bombs for the long range. Two prototypes were developed by simply adding inner wing segments to the Ju-90 wings as parts of the Ju-290 airframes, and then expanding the fuselages with new sections. The first prototype, made from the Ju-90 V6, was flown for the first time on October 20th, 1943, after construction and assembly at the Dessau plant. It performed satisfactorily, and an order was placed for 26 of the new Ju-390A1 planes. None were built by the cancellation of the aircraft halfway through 1944, a cancellation that ended the Ju-290 as well. The second prototype used the Ju-290 airframe more extensively, resulting in a more extended plane. It was then planned to offer a maritime reconnaissance version labeled Ju-390B, and a long-range bomber version labeled Ju-390C. The Ju-390 was shown to Hitler, along with other prototypes, in November 1943 at Insterburg. The first prototype was allegedly taken to Prague, where it flew several test flights until March 1944. On June 29, 1944, the Reichsluftfahrtministerium paid Junkers for 7 Ju-390s. However, the contract for the original order of 26 was cancelled. By September, the whole Ju-390 project had been thrown out. The history of the Ju-390 is murky and complicated. Diverging sources. Historians disagree on just how exactly Germans used the craft. The second prototype was configured for maritime reconnaissance, given the FUG-200 Hohenpfeil air-to-surface vessel radar and 5 20mm MG-151 cannons. Other historians claim the armament was actually 4 cannons, with an additional 3 MG-131 machine guns. The chief designer and technical director of Junkers, Heinrich Hertel, suggested that the second prototype was never completed during a hearing in 1945. No claim is conclusive. According to some historians, the Ju-390 flew on several occasions, both in and out of testing. A July 1944 decree from the Reichsluftfahrtministerium called for the end of all large combat aircraft programs. This was to allocate enough resources for the emergency fighter program, which is why many believe the flights of the Ju-390 may be more fiction than fact. Oberlieutenant Joachim Eiserman reportedly flew the second prototype at Rethlen Air Base on February 9, 1945. Flight logs report that he flew a total of 50 minutes of circuits around the base and a 20-minute flight to move it to Leers. Aerial spottings popped up around the world, lending credence to the possibility that the Germans may have extensively tested the aircraft's range. German test pilot Hans-Joachim Pankhurst told the Daily Telegraph in 1969 that he had flown the plane over Cape Town, South Africa, in early 1944. Furthermore, author James P. O'Donnell learned from a 1970s telephone interview with Albert Speer that a secret Ju-390 flight occurred near the end of the war over Japan. O'Donnell's report of the account is the only source, as Speer never wrote about it himself. The most fascinating allegation was one which supposed the German planes made it all the way to North America. First published in a 1955 issue of the RAF Flying Review, 2 Ju-390 planes were claimed to have buzzed New York City for more than an hour. The following year, the magazine released a letter as evidence, its claim being highly contested. According to the letter, Allies learned that the Ju-390 was delivered to Fernafklärungsgruppe in June 1944. The information came from prisoners of war. These same prisoners of war claimed that the Ju-390 had successfully carried out a 32-hour reconnaissance mission 12 miles from the coast of New York. British authorities denounced the claims. 2 British intelligence reports used the interrogations, and other sources claimed that a Ju-390 had taken photos of Long Island. The story remains unconfirmed. No conclusive evidence ever surfaced. The first prototype was sent to Dessau in November 1944, where it was stripped and destroyed before the U.S. Army arrived. The second-to-last America bomber under consideration by the Germans was Focke-Wulf's Ta 400, a six-engine heavy bomber. It was one of the first planes ever to use parts from a variety of nations. Although it represented one of the most advanced German designs of the war, it never got the green light for development. It was designed by Kurt Waldemar Ta as a long-range reconnaissance or bomber aircraft. It used 6 BMW 801D radial engines, plus 2 UMO 004 jet engines that were added later in development. The design started in 1943, with most of the work done by French employees in the Châtillon commune of Paris. Contracts for the construction of components were awarded to smaller companies in Germany, Italy, and France as part of the effort to swiftly assemble the prototypes. The design of the T-400 featured a shoulder-mounted 4-degree dihedral wing with highly tapered outer panels. It also featured 2 vertical stabilizers at the tail's tips, which was meant to have a pressurized compartment for the crew, with a tunnel connecting it to the tail turret. Aircraft defense would come from other remote-controlled turrets, including 4 MG-131 machine guns and 10 MG-151 cannons. The Focke-Wulf T-400 carried 9 crew members, the majority of which were operating guns. It was intended to carry 53,000 pounds in bombs with a total weight of 177,000 pounds. Thanks to the number of engines, the T-400 should have been able to fly for 12,000 kilometers, or 7,500 miles, cruising at 325 kilometers, or 202 miles per hour. The version using the 2 additional UMO 004 jet engines would have had a maximum range of 13,000 kilometers, or 8,100 miles in the bomber role, or 14,000 kilometers, 8,700 miles in his reconnaissance role. While Focke-Wulf created their America bomber mainly as a backup for the Messerschmitt Me 264, its development would have been worthwhile. Yet the T-400 required a lot of rare materials and excessive labor compared to Messerschmitt's proposal, so the RLM completely discarded Focke-Wulf's project. In October 1943, the company received a termination of the program. Kurt Waldemar Ta discussed its continuation with Italian aviation industrialists during a meeting in April 1944. This led many to believe that developments financed by the Italian industry continued until the war's end. In the beginning, the development of the America bomber aircraft was slow. However, construction kicked into high gear once Germany declared war on the United States. The search for a long-range bomber with 6 engines and a substantial bomb load capacity was finally necessitated in 1942. Nevertheless, it was too late. The Me-264, Ju-390, T-400, and finally Henkel AG-277 were all competing for the contract, but none received it. The Henkel HE-277 was a derivative of the HE-177. It would initially feature 2 Daimler-Benz DB606 power system engines made from 2 combined engines each. Due to engine issues, they agreed to use 4 unitized BMW 801E radial engines instead. Still, the design never saw production. No reliable prototype was ever built. As the war fell to the Allies, the German aviation industry struggled, and plans fell through. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring had blocked the development of the HE-277 due to mounting frustration with the 177A engine issues. He reportedly forbade Ernst Henkel from working on anything other than the 177 until the problem was fixed. According to that version of events, Henkel met with Hitler to get permission for the HE-277. Others have contradicted this version of events. Either way, the first HE-277 proposal was sent to the RLM in February 1943. Sketches revealed that Henkel was planning to build its heavy bomber with a shoulder mount, with a 40-meter, 131-foot wingspan and optional gears. Plans called for 2 divergent bomb bays, one for a tailwheel version of the aircraft and another with a tricycle undercarriage. The tricycle-geared version had a maximum range of 11,100 kilometers, or 6,900 miles, equaling the capabilities of its predecessor, the Me-261. The aircraft would have been armed with 5 turrets, 2 manned, and the others remotely operated. 3 separate efforts by Ernst Henkel to get his prototype built led nowhere. 2 examples made near the end of the war included prototype examples he'd manufactured, with only the prototype parts ready. In April 1944, the RLM ordered Henkel to cease all work on the 277 and to scrap its components. As the Allies started dominating, the German army desperately wanted a miracle weapon to lead them to victory. They developed the V-2 rocket, or America rocket, which sought to destroy the enemy across the ocean. The destructive imagination of Germany knew no limits. They considered arming submarines with rockets and sending them to the East Coast. However, like the America bomber, plans fell through. Unfortunately, countless engineers and forced laborers worked at facilities and secret factories, focused on weapons to kill Americans. Thankfully, forced labor sometimes purposefully sabotaged German equipment. Yet the Germans' most significant detractor was the aggressive Allied bombing raid campaign, which set German factories back, as well as the development of transatlantic capabilities. In the end, all efforts died in vain. Not one of their plans to bomb America came to fruition.